Welcome back to another deep dive into the sources.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, and if you are joining us today, you're probably someone who loves those sudden aha moments.
Right, that feeling when a scattered bunch of historical puzzle pieces they suddenly snap together.
Exactly. It reveals a picture you never really expected.
Oh.
But we also know you hate information overload.
Which is why we do the heavy lifting for you.
Always. And today we have a truly fascinating mission. We're looking at a blog post published today, actually, March 7, 2026.
Fresh off the press.
Yeah, it's from a website called Knowledge is King, written by an author named Mark Wells. The piece is titled The Ghost of Terra Nullius from Colonial.
And it is quite a read.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore a profound argument made in this text. How a seemingly ancient, dusty Latin legal phrase still secretly governs the mechanics of our modern world today. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand the underlying current of this text, we have to start with a fundamental premise that's laid out right at the beginning.
The idea about what history actually is, right?
Right. The source posits that history is rarely just a series of dates or battles. Instead, history is a series of justifications.
Justifications, I like that word.
It's crucial here. We are looking at the legal and intellectual frameworks that powerful people built, essentially, to give themselves permission to act.
To do whatever they wanted, basically.
Exactly. And according to this analysis, perhaps no legal doctrine has been more destructive or more resilient than the concept of terra nullius.
Terra nullius. So translating that from the Latin, it literally means nobody's land.
Nobody's land, yeah.
On the surface, it sounds like something out of an old explorer's journal,
Yeah.
A dusty rule about planting a flag on an uninhabited island somewhere.
Just claiming a barren rock.
Right. But clearly the lands these empires were claiming weren't actually empty. There were millions of people living there.
Millions. With complex societies.
So how did the legal minds of the era logically square that circle in the text?
That is the massive, world-altering loophole the text focuses on. It wasn't about the land actually being devoid of human life in a physical sense.
Because they could see the people standing right there.
Exactly. It was about whether the empire recognized that human life as legally valid.
Wow. Okay.
The doctrine dictated that lands were deemed empty if the imperial powers considered the current inhabitants uncivilized or just simply legally non-existent.
I mean, it's like walking into a fully furnished occupied house.
Right.
You're looking at the family eating dinner at the table, and you just declare the house completely abandoned because you don't recognize the style of their furniture.
That's a great way to put it.
You tell yourself, well, they don't have my kind of chairs. They don't use my kind of silverware, so they must not actually be real tenants. This property is mine.
It is a staggering level of arrogance.
Truly staggering.
What's fascinating here is that it perfectly illustrates how human beings, and by extension, empires operate psychologically and legally.
The paperwork aspect of it.
Yes. The core insight from the text is that human beings require paperwork to commit atrocities so they can still sleep at night.
It's chilling when you phrase it like that.
But it's what the author argues. Power doesn't just use swords and guns. It uses pens.
Right.
By establishing a standard of civilization that conveniently only applied to themselves, empires could write a law that legally erased entire populations.
They granted themselves permission to take whatever they wanted.
While maintaining a pristine veneer of bureaucratic legitimacy back home.
Because it provides immense psychological comfort to the oppressor.
Oh, absolutely.
You aren't stealing, you are just claiming an empty space. You aren't a conqueror, you're an administrator.
Precisely. The sword does the physical conquering, but the pen makes it legally and morally palatable.
The conquerors could look at themselves in a mirror because the law told them the space was void to begin with.
And the text argues that this DNA, this specific way of thinking, didn't just stay in the colonial era regarding land.
It infected everything else.
It infected how we view personhood and property. Which brings us to the first major evolution of this doctrine that the author points out.
Right. The source shifts the focus from the land to the people themselves, specifically looking at the North American context and the brutal mechanics of the U.S. slave trade.
Yes.
Just to be clear, we're unpacking the author's argument here. But wait, how does a land doctrine logically apply to a human being?
The author refers to this as an intellectual and legal nullification.
Nullification, making something void.
Exactly. To justify chattel slavery, which is the absolute total commodification of a human being, a specific legal fiction had to be engineered.
The state had to categorize Black people not as persons, but as property.
They took the spirit of Terra Nullius and applied it to flesh and blood.
A legal fiction. That phrase really sticks out in the text.
That's a powerful concept.
It is the law intentionally pretending something is true to achieve a specific, usually economic outcome.
Yes. By legally categorizing human beings as property, the state essentially declared their innate humanity a null space.
And that is the direct through line the author is drawing. Just as empty land could be claimed, mapped, and exploited without guilt, the law created empty people.
In the eyes of the jurisprudence of the time, their humanity was voided.
And because they were legally void, they could be owned, traded, exhausted entirely for capital generation.
It is a chilling application of the concept.
You declare the land nobody's, so you take it. You declare the person a nobody, so you own them.
And it is crucial to emphasize the mechanical nature of this, as the text outlines.
It wasn't an accident.
Not at all. This wasn't some organic, unfortunate societal drift. It was a highly calculated stripping of status.
Driven by economics.
Entirely. The machinery of early global capitalism required massive, endless amounts of labor to function.
To acquire that labor without facing constant moral or legal friction from their own institutions.
They used the pen. They created a null space where human rights simply did not apply.
It really reframes the institution of slavery. It strips away the myth that it was just a product of less enlightened times.
It exposes it as a vast, complex intellectual and legal bureaucracy.
Designed to systematically erase humanity on paper before a single chain was ever forged.
Exactly.
Now the text moves on to a second major historical application of this doctrine. It points the lens at the historical civilizational clash between Western imperial frameworks and the Islamic world.
Right, and again, we are just walking through the historical analysis the author presents here.
Absolutely. So what does this clash look like through the lens of Terra Nullius?
The intellectual battleground here manifested as a strict refusal by Western powers to recognize non-Western forms of sovereignty.
Okay, so ignoring their right to rule themselves.
During the era of high imperialism, you had vast territories governed by Islamic caliphates or sultanates.
These weren't empty spaces.
Far from it. These were highly structured, deeply entrenched societies with extensive trade routes, intricate legal codes, centuries of history.
He uses a very specific phrase here to describe the European standard. Westphalian standards of governance.
Yes, that's a key term.
For those of us who haven't taken a political science class recently, what exactly does the text mean by that in this context?
It is a reference to the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which essentially birthed the modern European idea of a nation-state.
Meaning what, practically?
It means a country has very rigid, drawn borders on a map, a centralized bureaucracy, and absolute sovereignty over its specific territory.
I see. So the European empires looked at the rest of the world and decided that if a society didn't operate exactly like a Westphalian nation-state,
then it wasn't a real government.
So because these Islamic sultanates operated on different organizing principles, maybe with more fluid borders or governance tied to religious authority rather than just geographic lines,
they were treated as legally void?
They were, in the eyes of the European powers, just another form of nobody's land.
Exactly. The refusal to recognize Islamic sovereignty created a permanent default state of wartime.
And the text specifies that this was a legal and intellectual wartime just as much as a physical one.
It is that furnished house analogy all over again.
The empire looks at a thriving sultanate, says, well, I don't see a Westphalian nation-state with a centralized parliament.
And proceeds to bulldoze the society.
Unbelievable.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the justification used was the infamous civilizing mission.
Right. We're here to help you.
Because the existing structures were deemed void or backward, the imperial powers felt completely justified, even righteous, in overriding those existing religious and social structures with their own.
The text methodically builds this case. Terra Nullius justified the theft of land, then its spirit justified the theft of human beings, and then it justified the attempt to overwrite entire global civilizations.
It is a very specific type of weaponized arrogance that simply changes its target over time.
Which brings us to the present day. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Because he doesn't just leave it in the past.
No, he doesn't. The author takes all of this heavy historical weight and drops it right into the 21st century.
The modern application?
The argument is that modern globalism is simply the new evolution, the new polished name for this old game of Terra Nullius.
It's a bold claim.
It is. I mean, wait, is he seriously arguing that an aggressive multinational corporation opening up a factory is using the exact same underlying mechanism as a colonial empire claiming foreign soil? Isn't that a massive leap to make?
It sounds like a leap, but the text bridges that gap by focusing on the underlying philosophy rather than the physical mechanics.
Okay.
Obviously, we aren't seeing empires planting physical flags on beaches anymore. Instead, we see the vast expansion of borderless economic interests.
The corporate equivalent.
The philosophy remains. Local friction is deemed uncivilized or inefficient and thus must be nullified.
Okay, I see. The text argues that global entities, massive financial institutions, multinational conglomerates, they often treat local cultures, local traditions, or even local environmental regulations as mere obstacles to be cleared.
Just friction.
They look at the local landscape, whether it is a small rural town or an entire developing nation, as an empty space waiting for superior global management.
The rationalization is remarkably similar to the colonial era.
How so?
The global entity believes its hyper-efficient economic model is the pinnacle of civilization.
The new Westphalian standard.
Exactly. Therefore, any local resistance, say, a community wanting to protect its local businesses, or a developing nation trying to regulate its own resources.
It's just backward friction getting in the way of progress.
The local needs are effectively nullified by the stroke of a pen on a trade agreement.
Think about how you, the listener, might see this playing out in your own town or city.
It happens everywhere.
Think about when a massive, faceless conglomerate moves into a community and essentially rewrites the local economic reality, completely ignoring the existing culture, the historical footprint, or the small ecosystems of business that were already thriving there.
The suggestion here isn't just that this is aggressive capitalism.
It is the Ghost of Terra Nullius in action.
It is the modern boardroom version of declaring a space empty so you can extract value from it without feeling bad about it.
That is what makes this analysis so compelling.
Yeah.
It takes a concept that feels like it belongs behind glass in a museum
And uses it to decode the unseen, often sanitized forces shaping our daily global economics.
The paperwork just looks like a corporate merger or a deregulation bill now.
Exactly.
It's interesting because if you look at the rest of Wells's blog, this idea of nullification isn't just a historical theory for him.
No, it's his entire framework.
Is clearly the central lens through which he views everything happening today. To really get the full weight of this source material, you just have to look at the other posts on his sidebar.
The broader context of the site is revealing.
It's a broader ecosystem of information that shows a recurring obsession with exposing hidden realities.
The author is deeply invested in looking past the official, polished narrative to find the cold mechanics operating underneath.
Right.
The entire site is an exercise in spotting what has been declared void by those in charge.
For example, right there on the page is another post titled, "The Great Disconnect. Why the Stock Market Smashes Records When Your Wallet is Empty."
A very timely piece.
The preview text asks a question I think a lot of people are wrestling with right now. How can the DOW be sitting at an all-time high, with headlines screaming about a booming economy, while everyday items like a dozen eggs or a gallon of milk cost twice as much as they used to?
It points out a massive contradiction between the macro narrative of economic success being pushed from the top down and the actual micro-reality lived by the individual.
The everyday experience.
It is the literal nullification of the working person's daily experience in favor of the stock market's triumphant narrative.
So if the economic indicators look good on paper, your empty wallet is treated as statistically void.
Precisely.
And it's not just economics, it is the mechanics of political secrecy too. There's another post titled "The 35765 Shield, When Secrecy Becomes a Congressional Standard."
This one is particularly striking.
The text cites a specific recent House vote, 357 to 65, that successfully blocked the release of congressional sexual misconduct reports. Now, what does a congressional vote have to do with colonial land grabs?
It has everything to do with the overarching theme of using the pen to create a void.
Creating a void of accountability.
In this case, the legal mechanism, a congressional vote, is being used to hide uncomfortable truths and shield power.
The victim's experiences and the public's right to know are legally nullified by the stroke of a legislative pen.
The powerful grant themselves permission to ignore the consequences of their actions by legally declaring the evidence off limits.
Just legislating it out of existence. But the site isn't just a catalog of political and economic grievances.
No, it's much broader than that.
It is a really unique blend of history, science, and even spirituality. There was a post called "Your Brain on Faith," bridging science and Islam.
which explores how those two worlds, which modern discourse often treats as mutually exclusive, might actually be deeply interconnected.
The text is consistently challenging the established boundaries of how we are supposed to think.
It rejects the modern intellectual framework that declares faith void in the face of science, or vice versa.
And he digs into hidden history, too. There's a post titled The Hidden History, Islam and the Haitian Revolution.
Going beyond the standard narrative.
Yeah, the preview mentions going beyond the legendary night at Bois Caman, which is usually where the story of the Haitian Revolution begins in the popular imagination, focusing on the Vodou ceremony.
He is looking for the deeper, untold layers of history.
Specifically, the Islamic influences among the enslaved populations that have been erased or conveniently forgotten by mainstream historians.
Again, he is hunting for the things that have been declared null by the dominant historical narrative and dragging them back into the light.
Refusing to accept the empty spaces on the historical map.
Exactly. He won't let the void stand.
And perhaps the most telling title of all, the one that ties the macro to the micro, is called Beneath the Ego, Reclaiming Your True Nature.
A very philosophical turn.
The post compares human nature to a precious diamond that is buried beneath layers of mud, dirt, and rock.
This raises an important question for all of us about how we navigate the modern world.
How so?
Well, if our true nature is a diamond buried under the mud of societal conditioning,
Right.
and if our history is full of powerful forces constantly trying to legally erase our humanity, our labor, or our local sovereignty.
Are we passively accepting the nullifications handed down to us?
Exactly. The underlying challenge across all these texts is to dig through the mud, to reject the legal fictions that tell us we are just consumers or data points.
To reclaim what is real.
Yes.
It is a profound, sweeping challenge. It connects the intensely personal struggle of the ego with the massively global mechanics of imperialism and corporate expansion.
It all comes back to seeing through the illusions, the fictions, created by those who hold the pen.
And that brings us perfectly to the concluding thoughts in the main piece on Terra Nullius.
The history of this doctrine is a stark, unavoidable reminder that power does not require physical force if it can master the bureaucracy of reality.
By declaring a land, a people, or a truth null, systems grant themselves quiet permission to take. So, what does this all mean? When we put all these disparate pieces together, from ancient explorers to chattel slavery, from the D.O.W. Jones to hidden congressional reports, what is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener?
The ultimate takeaway from synthesizing these sources is that recognizing this pattern of nullification is the absolute first step to ensuring that you don't become a victim of it.
You have to see it to stop it.
If you don't know what the paperwork of erasure looks like, you won't see it happening to you or your community.
Right.
But once you understand that power operates by legally defining things as void or empty or uncivilized, you can spot the modern versions of Terra Nullius.
No matter how polished, corporate, or bureaucratic their new titles might be.
If a system can define something you hold dear as null, that system has just given itself legal and moral permission to exploit it.
That is a sharp, incredibly powerful synthesis. The ghost of Terra Nullius is still haunting us. It just traded its colonial uniform for a modern suit and a trade agreement.
Very well said.
Now, before we go, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Something to ponder.
Something to mull over on your commute or your walk that builds on everything we just discussed, but pushes it into a territory the text didn't explicitly mention.
I'm intrigued.
If Terra Nullius is about declaring physical spaces or human rights void to justify taking them, what about our digital lives?
Oh, that is a fascinating and largely unregulated frontier.
Think about it. In an era where tech companies freely scrape our personal data, our private habits, our geographical movements, and our daily attention to train algorithms and sell targeted ads.
Are our digital footprints being treated as the new Terra Nullius?
Exactly. Are the massive tech conglomerates looking at the digital landscape of our lives as an empty, uncivilized space, just waiting to be claimed, mapped, and exploited by borderless economic interests?
Have we been legally nullified in the digital realm so our data can be harvested without consequence?
Are we the occupants of a furnished digital house that big tech has simply declared empty?
It is something to seriously think about the next time you click I agree on a 50-page terms of service update.
A very unsettling but highly necessary question for the modern era. Well, that is all the time we have for today. We hope this deep dive into the sources gave you some of those sudden aha moments and helped you see the underlying mechanics of the world just a little bit differently.
Keep digging past the mud.
Keep looking for the diamond, and most importantly, keep questioning the narrative they hand you. Until next time, take care.
Goodbye, everyone.